So I'm the editor-in-chief of Wired Magazine, and my job tonight is to talk about technology and to talk about the way things are changing. And so the strategy I have and the way I've structured the speech is to try to talk about the most interesting things that are changing chronologically, from before we're born to after we die. So that's what I'm going to do tonight. And what I'm going to start with is this point right here. I really do feel like technology is making things better, right? It's making the world better. The stuff you guys are inventing, it is making things better. It is making our lives better. It's making our lives work better. But there are all kinds of like crazy decisions that get built into the system right now that have huge effects down the line. And there are all kinds of choices, maybe more in the blockchain industry than any other. Choices that get made now that reverberate in the future and have huge consequences for us, for our children, for our descendants, even for what it means to be human. So that's the starting point. That's what interests me the most. And part of the reason why I think this moment is so important is because I do believe this curve. Like, we are right there. We are right at the moment before we have machines that are undoubtedly and undeniably more intelligent than us in every way. We are about to hand off the role of the most intelligent species on the planet to machines that we have invented, which is fine. I'm down with that. But it's going to be complicated. The reason it's happening, Moore's Law. All of you guys in technology know about Moore's Law. The number of chips in a transistor doubles every year and a half, which means that every 10 years, your devices are roughly 1,000 times better than they were before. This keeps happening, and it never stops. Because the machines you invent with the more powerful technology help you invent the machines that have more powerful technology, and on after that. Once we have machines that are more intelligent than humans in every way, they will be inventing the next machines. So this doesn't slow down. We are right here. We are at an amazing moment in time in human history. Each point in front of you is bigger than anything that's ever happened. At the same time, science gathers knowledge faster than society gathers wisdom. We have to really think. And that's why I like talking to audiences like this. That's why I like going out giving talks. And that's fundamentally why I like being editor of Wired. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out what the most important conversations are, what the most important decisions are, what the hardest choices are, and we're trying to provide information and tell stories that help society make the right choices. All right, there we are. Let's get going. So, as I said, I'm going to talk through some of these interesting choices, starting with childhood. And there'll be a lot of cartoons, because I love cartoons. So one of the most interesting things we have coming down the line is called IVG. We all know IVF, 40 years old. First kids born in test tubes are now adults. They're doing great. But IVG is different. IVG is maybe 5 years down the line, maybe 10. And what it is it's the capacity to take any cells, like from inside my cheek, and turn them into sperms and eggs, right? And to basically be able to create what we need to create life from any other human. So, an infertile person can become a parent, right? That's great. That's why this is going to progress, because the first uses of it will be amazing. It also means that I could become a parent, not of a clone, but of a parent where I am the father and the mother in some way. You can imagine somebody whose spouse dies taking a cell and then creating a sperm out of that. Most interestingly, when this comes, you know what we won't need on this planet? We won't need men. There will be no biological necessity for males to exist, which, given the last couple years, is probably a good thing. So, that is one of the first things, one of the most interesting things that's happening. One of the most interesting choices we'll have to make is how do we want this technology to advance? Next. That's my kid. Next is gene editing and CRISPR. Right? So CRISPR technology, you probably all heard about it. It's the capacity to go inside of genes and to change them, right? To cut things out. Right now we can basically edit a little bit. Soon we'll be able to write into genes. But what we'll be able to do is first we will use this to solve problems, right? We will use this to knock out diseases, to help children who have, are going to live short, very difficult lives, and that is a great thing to do. But the next thing we're going to do after that is we're going to use it to enhance us. We're going to use it to make us stronger, to make us see better, to make us live longer. And it's going to create all kinds of interesting questions, because that's good, right? We all want our kids to be able to do that. But there are going to be class issues, right? Because this is going to come to the developed world first. It's going to come to rich people first. So there's going to be an amazing technology to enhance children that will help them grow through every stage of life. And we are on the cusp of having this, but it's got real societal complexities that it's going to add. Also, I love this photo, so I have to include it. Another thing that happens in childhood, the trade-off that we see all the time between privacy and utility. We saw this in the news today with Google, right? Google's in all kinds of trouble because, you have this service on Google where you can turn off location services, and you think if you turn off location services, Google doesn't track you. But of course, Google does track you in all kinds of other ways, right? And people just realized that even if you say Google don't track me, Google don't map me, Google is mapping you, and Google knows where you are. And the reason for that is because they offer better services, and it's baked in from the beginning. The idea that we don't really deserve our privacy because you'll get a better service if you ignore it is baked into all of these systems, and it's very hard to unbake it. And it's something I'm starting to realize with my kids as they start to use technology and the benefits of advertising to children. So, childhood, the first time we have to deal with this really complex trade-off, which is at the center of a lot of things I'm going to talk about in the rest of this speech. All right, so that's childhood. Let's talk a little bit about adolescence. So when I started at Wired, I got an email from this guy, Kevin Systrom. He's the CEO of Instagram. And he said, hey, I like Wired. Why don't you come meet? And I have a very firm policy, which is that if a billionaire asks you to have coffee, you say yes. So I said, yeah, I'll come meet with you, Kevin. So I go down to Menlo Park, talk to Kevin, and I ask him, I said, what is the most important thing you're working on? Like, what drives you? Right? Like, he told me a bunch of this and a bunch of that, and then he finally got into it, and it was pretty interesting. He said he wants to make the internet nice. Now, how do you make the internet nice? Yeah, that is a good thing, right? Make the internet nice. The internet should be nicer. And so I asked Kevin, how do you make the internet nice, right? And so he starts talking about this journey, this product journey that Instagram's been on. First thing they did is they created the capacity to remove specific emojis in comments. They rolled it out on Taylor Swift's Instagram feed. She got in a fight with Kim Kardashian. I can't remember why. All of Kim Kardashian's fans had put green snakes in Taylor Swift's Instagram feed. Instagram gave Miss Swift the ability to remove all the green snakes. And that is the beginning of a really interesting transformation of a tech company. So they roll that out. They roll out some anti-spam filters. They roll out a bunch of AI to identify whether somebody is close to self-harm. And if they do, they sort of send up counseling numbers. That's really good. And then they decide to do something incredibly interesting, which is to use AI to identify cruel language, to try to use computer systems to find sentences that are mean and then effectively to vaporize them. So to show you how hard a challenge it is, I chose a random post off Kevin's Instagram feed. I don't know if you can read all the comments, but it's pretty interesting. When you try to think about how do you build a computer system to identify mean language. So the first comment, so this is something Kevin posted sometime, June 23, 2016. Go to the window and take a big leap out of it. Very mean, right? But all the words are nice. Window is nice. Leap is nice. Leap of faith. That's a good, nice thing to say. Meme lives matter. Who the hell knows what that means, right? At the time, in context, it's a critique of Kevin Systrom saying he's been too, obsequious towards Black Lives Matter. But hard for a computer to figure that out. You suck. That's mean. Even though they changed the K to the C. Watermelon, what does that mean? Picnic? No, it actually is a sexual insult at Kevin Systrom. But you get the point. It's really hard to tell what is mean and what's not mean. So what Instagram does, what Systrom does, is he hires tons and tons of people, and he has them go through endless comments like this, people who understand context, you know the difference between a lyric and an insult, who can tell that you suck is mean, go to a window, take a leap out of a window is mean, and they identify all the things that are mean, and then he takes basically like frozen brains out of the Facebook freezer, and he trains them on all of the ratings made by the humans. And he iterates and tests, until he has an AI system that can, on fresh insults and fresh comments, match what the humans say. So he's created a computer system, and he doesn't really know how it works, but he does know that it matches what the humans say. And so that has been rolled out on Instagram. I don't know if you've noticed the change. Does Instagram seem nicer? Does it seem nice? No, Instagram does not seem nice. Well, it would seem meaner without this. But it's also really complicated. So one of the reasons I like this story is because making the internet nice is not an unadulterated good. Because what happens is a lot of speech gets wiped away, right? One of the best things we have in this country is free speech. It's the First Amendment. It's one of the most important things. One of the reasons why our republic works. And Instagram, where hundreds of millions of people gather, which is the central organizing principle in lots of young people's lives, there is not free speech. Because if you say something mean, it will be erased. And in fact, it will be erased in such a way that you won't know it. If I type something mean on your feed, I will still see it on my phone, you won't see it on yours, and nobody else will see it. That's really, really weird. And so I was interested in this story because it's such a good motivation. Make the internet nicer, but at the cost of free speech. So I asked System about this. And he was silent. Can we turn the volume up on this? Not that. Well, so what he says, when I asked him about that, and I said, don't you care about free speech? Don't you care about the Republic? Is that a sign I can try again? Let's see again, because it's interesting. No. All right. What he said is that he's not optimizing for free speech itself. He's optimizing for overall free speech, for a place where people feel safe, where they feel like they can say more things. And that's interesting, and that's defensible, but it's not the way Jefferson or Madison thought about it. And all the tech companies are going through this right now. We've seen it in the Alex Jones debacle. All the tech companies are really pulling away from the idea of free speech. And they're really going to an area where we're much more filtered, we're much more censored, and they're using algorithms to determine whether what we say is appropriate on those platforms. And I can see the virtues in doing that, certainly on a platform used by kids. And I can also see the societal costs. So I think that is one of the most interesting things happening in tech. And to the AV team, I have a couple more videos coming up. If we can fix before I get there, that would be amazing. All right, so that was adolescence. Let's go to college. So I remember 10 years ago, I remember this vividly. I was working at a magazine called Legal Affairs, and I was doing long-form journalism. As you know from my bio, that's what I've done more or less ever since I got fired from 60 Minutes. Editing long magazine stories. And there was a sense at that time that there was no future in that. And there was no future in that because kids no longer had an attention span, because they could no longer pay attention to anything. And I remember reading the interview with this guy. This is a guy, a Rhodes Scholar. I remember reading this interview, like a totally random story. Joe Shea is not, you probably never heard of him. This interview probably didn't affect anybody else. But it was a moment in my life where I thought, I should switch my professions. I should give up on this. Nobody has any attention spans. I should bail. And so I thought about that, and I said, you know what, I'm not going to bail, I'm going to keep going. I kept editing long-form stories. I went to the New Yorker. I stayed with it. And then a couple years ago, I decided, you know what, I'm going to try to look up Joe O'Shea, because I remember this quote. It just stuck in my head. I'm going to see what he's doing. What happened to this guy? What happened to this Rhodes Scholar with no attention span who couldn't even look at a book? What is he doing now? He's probably out on Skid Row, right? He's probably doing, or maybe he's working at Twitter. So I decided to go look this guy up. He's an author. And I think actually this story is really heartwarming because in a way it encapsulates, I think, something important that technology is doing. And that is that it's actually enhancing our attention spans. It does make us distracted all the time. Probably, a whole bunch of you are like dying to pull your phone out of your pocket. And when I say it, that urge will become even stronger, right? It's a constant distraction for us, but it's also an enhancer. Technology also lets us absorb art more deeply, understand it, debate it in new ways, learn more things about it, right? Think about the way art works. This is the most popular television show in the 70s. Think about the complexity of MASH, right? Think about the complexity of Game of Thrones. Who can say our attention spans are shrinking when in art we've moved from that to this? Look at the way video games work. Think about the video games we had when we were kids. Now think about the complexity that's put into them. By the way, I will say about the slide, I was looking for a slide of complex video games. I don't even know what game this is, but if you look closely, oh, you can't see it. The license plate says, I love Nick. So that is my favorite slide. But the point is just complexity continues. And technology, which does distract us and does pull us out of the moment, also has real benefits. Now, another thing about technology in college, or at least that stage in life, is what it does to politics. And what it does to protest. This is Tahrir Square. And so one thing that I think, and I think this is really important for the way the world is changing, is that technology makes protest happen faster. It makes politics happen faster. It makes it easier to organize a revolution, right? We want to bring down the mayor of Las Vegas. We can bring down the mayor of Las Vegas. We can tweet a few things out. We can go out there. We can bring him down. But it makes thank you. I just got here this afternoon, but thank you very much. We can bring her down, and we should. Probably not. All right. She's good? All right, well, forget it. All right, so if we were in Egypt, we could bring down the government of Egypt much more quickly, which we should. But the point is, it makes everything happen faster. It makes it easier to organize. It makes people to get riled up, but it makes it harder to put things back together. And actually, the thing I'm thinking about now, most seriously, no jokes aside, is whether one of the things that's most happening in the world right now is whether technology is helping totalitarian systems more than democratic systems, right? It's helping whether the Chinese state can use technology more than the United States does. Whether, in fact, technology, which was supposed to help the men in the street, actually helps totalitarianism. That's what I'm writing about next. That's something I'm thinking about a lot, but that's something that worries me. And you see this in the United States where, forget about your politics, what happened during the 2016 election and what's happening in so many of our elections on both sides of the political aisle is people being pushed to the extremes. Technology pushes people into filter bubbles. It moves them to the extremes. It helps angry candidates who bring out lots of emotion. It helped Barack Obama, a candidate who drove a lot of emotion. It helped Donald Trump, a candidate who drove a lot of emotion. And that is a profound change. Now, this isn't the only reason why Trump is president, or the only reason why Obama was president. But I do think that one of the most important factors in American politics today was created because of algorithms at these tech companies. So what I was saying at the beginning, they're choices we make that have profound effects that sometimes we don't understand. So at Facebook, the choices they made and how the algorithm works, the way they set up their platform, not on purpose, but that rewarded outrage, that rewarded filter bubbles, that wanted people to kind of get and spread information that would rile people up because it would get people to spend more time on the platform, which led to more ads. That fundamental choice, that led American politics in some ways to where we are right now, and it also led to the crisis at Facebook over the last 6 months. And that's, I think, one of the most important things that's happened in tech this year, one of the things I've been most interested in. All right, so that's adulthood, childhood. Let's talk about adulthood. It looks like we're mostly adults here in the audience. So one thing, this is one of my favorite charts in tech. One of the things I think is most important is that we think about teaching kids how to use devices and how to use tech. We got to teach ourselves, right? Because look at this chart. This is a chart of the apps we use on our phones and whether we're happy with them or not. So the stuff on the left, that's like stuff we're happy about. So we spend 3 minutes a day in Google Calendar. We consider that time well spent. We spend 8 minutes in Audible. 10 minutes in Evernote. All the time I spend in Evernote, I'm very happy about. I love the time I spend in Evernote. Now let's take a look on the right. We're spending 81 minutes a day in Grindr, probably more because we're in Vegas, or maybe less because we don't need Grindr. But in any case, we're not happy we're spending the time there. 59 minutes in Facebook, 78 minutes in Tweetbot. Basically, what this shows is that that our phones are more powerful than we are. That we spend time that we regret on all of these apps. And that we are better selves. If we could make choices, we would spend our time differently, but we don't. And all the tech companies have realized this. One of the biggest ideas in tech this year, they're starting to make changes at the software level to try to make it easier to keep us out of these things. But I think this is really important. Our devices are sometimes not our friends, they're our enemies.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time, even if they would never say those things. So, for instance, they could have me say things like, Killmonger was right, or Ben Carson is in the sunken place, or, how about this, simply, President Trump is a total and complete dipshit. Now, you see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele. This is a dangerous time. Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet. That's a time when we need to rely on trusted news sources. It may sound basic, but how we move forward in the age of information is going to be the difference between whether we survive or whether we become some kind of fucked up dystopia. Thank you. And stay woke, bitches.
So that's amazing. And that's modern technology at work. And in the last election, all of us adults, all of us who are good at technology, were confused by a bunch of teens in Macedonia who put out all kinds of stuff saying the Pope endorses Donald Trump or whatever they wanted to put out there. And we are entering an era of AI where the ability to change images, the ability to change sound is incredible. So the ability to create fakes is incredible. And that video wasn't perfect, right? You can kind of tell that Obama's not saying exactly what he sounds like he's saying, but it's pretty damn good. And we are very close to not being able to tell what is true and what is fake. And as we get into that era, technology is going to be extremely important. And in fact, it's all through AI. You guys are all probably familiar with AI. We're here at a conference, Fourth Industrial Revolution. I want to talk for a minute about AI because it's one of the things that's it's hitting us right now, and it's hitting us in a really good way and a complicated way. Sundar Pichai, CEO of Google. AI is one of the most important things humanity is working on. It's more profound than, I don't know, electricity or fire. That's a pretty strong statement. And what's interesting about that statement, remember this guy runs the second most valuable company on earth, and he's reoriented the whole thing around AI. He's hired half the best AI researchers in the world. So this is happening. AI is happening. Machines are developing the capacity within narrow spectrums and within sort of structured data to think like humans, and to think, in fact, in ways that exceed the way humans think. Let me give you an example of how Google is using AI.
See, how may I help you?
Hi, I'd like to reserve a table for Wednesday the 7th.
For 7 people?
It's for 4 people.
4 people when? Today?
Next
Tonight?
Wednesday at 6 p.m.
Oh, actually we reserve for like after like 5 people. For 4 people you can come.
So the voice on the left there, the voice that was much clearer, that was actually AI. That was a machine system talking to a Chinese restaurant in Menlo Park, figuring out the difference between meeting at 6 o'clock and 6 people. So that's where we are. And it's within a relatively narrowly defined set, right? So Google said, okay, we're going to deal with restaurant reservations. What are the problems in restaurant reservations? Here are some data sets. Let's study these data sets. Let's train on them. Let's get good at that. But the capacity to do that right now in 2018 and not in 2025 is insane. And how quickly that came is insane. So there are all kinds of decisions we're going to face as we get into the era of AI. We're going to face decisions about how we use it in the military, right? If you have a machine that could make a decision on whether somebody should be a target without any human intervention, should you use it? Should you use AI to kill somebody without a human involved? Should you use AI to stop a missile? What about bias? What about biased data sets? What if there's some rule that the Instagram system has learned that's got racism embedded in it, right? We've seen this where machine learning algorithms trained on sentencing data have turned out to be racist. They've given racist sentences because the data they were trained on is racist. What about that? Who's going to actually control all the data that trains the AI? Will it be just the companies? And if it is, will they get too big? Will it be the governments? These are huge questions. These are some of the most interesting questions we face. And I recently had a long conversation for about an hour, hour and a half with the president about all of these things. And I was very impressed with what he said. Literally, every single one of those things I just talked about, I talked about with the president. And he had sophisticated answers to all of them. It wasn't the president of the United States, it was the president of France. And this is one of the things that worries me, is that the rest of the world is really thinking hard about this. France has national AI policies. They desperately want to catch up. China made this one of the top priorities of the entire government. They want to have AI supremacy by 2030. There's cities in China that are being designed from the ground up where you will only have self-driving cars, so there will not be other cars allowed. $250 million being put into AI center in China means nothing. Meanwhile, the United States is doing very, very little. The Trump administration was extremely reticent on AI, wasn't really thinking about it. Now has started to push the last month or two, mostly for military reasons. So we are, in certain ways, in this country, falling behind, certainly compared to China, on the most important technology in the world and not entirely thinking through not entirely thinking through the AI of how you're supposed to hold your microphone to get maximum volume without echo. So that's one of the most important questions facing us right now. How are we going to deal with AI? So let's move to work. So one of the questions we also face is, what are we going to do with robots and AI? How will it change the way we work? Yeah, this is my favorite cartoon. I hope everybody has a second to appreciate it. So I like to break this down into 3 different scenarios. The first is the way my old colleagues in New York talked about it. And that is basically that the robots are coming, they're going to be more intelligent than us, and they're going to take our jobs. Think about truck drivers, largest employer of males in the United States. Self-driving cars will be better And so self-driving cars will come and they'll take everybody out of work. Second scenario is the way people think about it in San Francisco, where I was working last week and where I work all the time. And that is that it's coming, things are changing, probably it'll be okay, right? If you think about banks and ATMs came around, everybody thought all the bankers would lose their jobs. Turns out actually they've got better jobs, right? You go and dispense the cash out front and you talk to the teller about the complicated things. Third way to think about it is the way Silicon Valley thinks about it, which is, we're totally fine, don't worry about it. We don't know what jobs are going to be created. We have no idea, in fact, but it always works. We've been scared of technology since 1900, and it always turns out okay. When it comes to self-driving cars, you know what? They're better, they're going to save lives, they don't drink, they don't fall asleep, and they'll make shipping so much easier, they'll make transportation so much easier, they'll create whole new economies. I feel like I'm somewhere between scenario 2 and scenario 3, but this is going to be one of the most interesting things to watch. All right, we've got 4 minutes left, so let's go to death. Actually, let's go to retirement. So how is technology changing retirement? I think there's a really interesting thing it's doing. So one thing we've seen is the growth of the gig economy. And people usually talk about the gig economy, right? Where you move from transient jobs, you drive a Lyft, you drive an Uber, you go away for 2 weeks, you rent out your apartment on Airbnb, you have some job part-time, you move cities. It's something that young people do. And increasingly, what technology has done by making time available and creating these opportunities is helped old people. My Lyft driver coming in from the airport today was a 60-year-old woman. And the reason why these jobs are good for old people are the same reason that they're good for young people. You don't need to be locked in the same place when you're an old person because you don't have kids in school. You have more flexibility. You can work some and not work some because you have Social Security coming. So I think you're going to see a real change in the way jobs work, when people who are older actually counterintuitively are going to have all these new jobs created. I also think that technology is going to change the way we're remembered when we pass away. This is one of my favorite stories we ran in Wired. It was about a story who was an engineer, and he was good at bots, and his father was dying. And he wanted his kids to remember his father. And so what he did is he recorded several hundred hours of conversation with his father. And then he trained a chatbot that could talk like his dad, that could respond to questions, that knew his stories, that knew what he'd done as a teenager. And he created this chatbot with his father's help. And then the climax of the story is him using the chatbot for his mother right before his father dies, and her saying, that does sound like him, and then him playing it for his kids. And I feel like this is one way we're going to be remembered. People will be able to create systems that sound just like us. You won't have just this video of me standing on stage. You'll be able to have a system that really sounds like me, and maybe my kids and my grandkids will want it, and maybe they won't. And then the last thing, it's not just how we're remembered after we die, it's the question of whether we will die at all. So a lot of people are working on the capacity to extract information, right? Our brains are just electrical signals. Can you take those electrical signals and figure out exactly what's going on in our brain? And can you export it? And you can export it, can you import it, right? Elon Musk is working on this. We ran a big story about a guy named Brian Johnson working on this. How do you connect our brains to the internet? And once you do that, how do you connect brains to each other? Ray Kurzweil thinks we're about 20 years away from this happening. That's probably an aggressive estimate, but it's not impossible. Brains are more complicated than a lot of people think. If if they were simple enough for us to understand them, we wouldn't be able to understand them. But many people are working on this problem, and with the way technology is moving, with the way AI is moving, with the way Moore's law is improving, as I mentioned at the very beginning, there is some capacity that something like this will happen, and when it does, what does it even mean to be human anymore?